So as you keep working on your sketch of the photograph that you chose from Pexels, you can start to darken those lines so you can see them better that you drew lightly to begin with. But then you can also go in and start adding more detail. And now would be a good point to switch from the color photo to the black and white photo I sent you if you sent me your photograph through email or Google Docs, and going in and drawing in those different values. So you can see that I've started to do that on this orchid, where I'm going in, drawing those differences in light and dark in order for me to see more clearly where those changes and values are. For your practice sketches, you don't have to do the entire thing where you're identifying all of the values within it. Just get to a point where you're happy and you feel confident that you're able to identify those values. Don't actually shade them in. Just draw in the shapes that those values create. So in this petal here, I have a darker value going down the middle. Again, just very roughly sketching them in. The point of it is to get you practicing identifying those different values and be able to translate that to your own drawing or sketch. So I had a light value here, a little bit lighter of a value here, a dark one up the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means, and you aren't actually shading. You're just lightly drawing those in so that you can see those differences. Over here, I have a value change coming in here. Darker values over here. Real dark, a darker value there. Just so that when you are painting, you're able to look at your drawing and say, okay, so this spot here is going to be a little bit darker than this area down here, where it's going to be almost white, and so on. Moving on to this one here, so I kind of already have that one drawn in there. But going in, drawing that difference, there's a difference there. And you'll see that this is also adding some more detail to your drawing as well. But overall, it's just going to help you in the end in when you're painting, placing those values where you say, okay, if you're using red, I need a darker red here on my flower due to the darker red represented in the actual photograph compared to down here where it's a lighter red. You can do this as much as you want for your practice, as I've said earlier, but the more you practice, the better you are going to get at it. So if you aren't feeling very confident in your drawing and painting abilities, I would suggest identifying a majority of those values within your practice work, just so that you are feeling much more confident in the final. This year, I'm pushing practice work a lot more, simply because the more you practice, the better you're getting. Notice that this is not perfect by any means, but it's close enough to where you can still identify the object that I'm drawing, as well as those values within it. So that would be the next step of your practice work in your drawing. Just going in and identifying and recreating those values within your own work. So it'll look different for everybody, but overall it's the same concept of just drawing in the weird organic shapes that those values create. So in this petal here, I got kind of a shape like that where it gets darker. I have a shape over here where it gets darker. And if it helps you to first draw in the dark values and then move on to lighter values and work that way, definitely go ahead and do that. You're just kind of working at what makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel more confident for your final drawing. You can see my proportions aren't exact, and I need to do some work on a few things. But overall, you can still tell that what I'm drawing are flowers. And then when you actually start adding in those values, you'll be able to see that as well. If you're drawing something much more realistic that doesn't allow for, I wouldn't say error because this isn't necessarily error, but more freedom for drawing, you're really going to have to focus on drawing out those proportions before you start adding in these values and the detail work, because you're going to want to have the proportions correct before you start doing this. But I was happy with the way that mine looked, even though my proportions aren't exactly the same. So I'm going in and identifying and placing those values.